Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. We're now joined by Scott McKay, publisher of the Hayride, contributor to Spectator. Scott, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So this House Republican fight over who shall be Speaker, Kevin McCarthy seems to be attempting a war of attrition. How's that war going?
Well, I think he's the one that's going to get attrited if he doesn't just do what's necessary to get the votes. And this thing has been really strange in that, like, he moves all of his stuff into the Speaker's office, and he runs around talking about how he's earned the job before he's got 218 votes. And what this has kind of shown is, it's all about Kevin McCarthy. And the moment calls for something totally different. The moment calls for it being all about the movement, it being all about the, finally allowing Congress to serve the needs of constituents rather than K Street. And I mean, because
exactly, that to me, this is a question of his competence, his political IQ. Is that the complete misunderstanding or lack of understanding of these 20 holdouts? He thought he could just sort of become, by behavior, make himself the presumptive speaker and everybody would fall in line. How do you not know the attitudes of so many members of your caucus?
Well, look, he was supposed to have 250 seats, or at least, 240. I mean, this was supposed to be a red wave election back in November, and it was supposed to sweep the Democrats out and give him a big majority, with which he wouldn't even have to worry about the Freedom Caucus and some of these other guys that are detractors of his.
Yeah, but he knew
he'd have the votes without him.
But he knew he didn't have those votes as of November 8th.
Right. And his response to that was to act like he did. And just assume that the entire 222 in the Republican caucus in the House would just fall in line, and he could do arm breaking and rhetoric to get these people to come on board. But from the very beginning, I mean, the Freedom Caucus offered a bunch of rules changes that were essentially process reforms in the House that were needed, that were absolutely necessary. I mean, if you compare the House of Representatives to practically any state legislature, what you're going to find is it is a much less effective and much less functional legislative body than any of those. And of course, nobody is really super happy with their state legislature either, but at least you have things like members being able to bring amendments on the floor, or you have a single subject rule on legislation. And things like that. The way Congress works, it's a dictatorship. It's almost useless to be a member of Congress because it's not a functioning legislative body. I mean, look how they handle the budget. There's a well-established procedure. You're supposed to have 12 different appropriations bills that get marked up in committee and then get brought to the floor in a timely manner. And instead, it's continuing resolutions at the last minute. Or worse, things like this stupid omnibus bill that they passed on Christmas Eve.
So who's going to blink? Oh, sorry, Scott. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but who's going to blink first? I mean, the 20 anti-McCarthy holdouts or someone from the majority of 201?
I'll put it this way. I don't see that 20 moving unless McCarthy basically gives them everything they want. And supposedly last night, that was kind of the direction that this thing started going in, is McCarthy offered up a bunch of extra bennies to these guys. Like, I think it's they played around with the motion to vacate the chair. Now all you need is just one guy to stand up on the floor and make the motion, whereas before you needed, I guess, 5 people willing to be sacrificial lambs to do that. So they did that, and apparently the Freedom Caucus is getting a bunch of people on the Rules Committee, which was something that they had asked for that everybody kind of scoffed at, and it looks like McCarthy's going to offer that to them now. And he's even willing to offer up a vote on a congressional term limits bill. Which I would have never thought he would do. But he's that desperate that he's going to allow them to bring that to the floor. Which, I'll be honest, this is like if Kevin McCarthy has to give those considerations and he gets to 218 as a result, it's a better speakership, even if Kevin McCarthy is no good, than it would have been at the beginning of this, because you actually have at that point. Now, he's got to stick to these promises, which is the number one reason why he's still struggling, because they don't trust him.
Right.
But if these things act like if it's on the up and up and there's not a double cross and they have been able to wrangle these promises out of him, you actually have a House of Representatives that, by its rules, is going to start being a lot more responsive to the people and a lot less responsive to K Street. And that's why this, honestly, that's why this has been reported the way it's been reported by the legacy media, that, the Republicans don't have their act together and this is embarrassing and it's a mess and blah, blah, blah. No, this is democracy and it's negotiation. This is people going to the mattresses to get what they came there for.
But then what happens? But then on the backside, though, if he makes all these concessions, is there then a concern that some of the moderates supporting him right now would break and say, you gave too much away to the Freedom Caucus, now I want X, Y, and Z in order to secure my vote, and then you have a faction of 12 to 20 the other way?
Well, it's theoretically possible. But after these guys have, look at Dan Crenshaw, for example.
Right.
Has called these people terrorists and, you never negotiate with terrorists and all this kind of stuff. All of a sudden, he's going to become a terrorist? These guys have they've painted themselves into a pretty tight corner in that, it's like the entire republic crashes down if Kevin McCarthy is not made speaker. That's the posture that these guys have all adopted. So if McCarthy has to make these concessions to Freedom Caucus people to get to 218, they can't slide out the back door, because they've already set themselves up. It's either Kevin McCarthy or chaos. And so, now you're for chaos? So I don't think that necessarily works. I think you may have that risk if McCarthy really can't get there later today and has to bow out, and then Steve Scalise probably would be the next guy up. And if he starts trying to make these deals to get to 218, and you've got moderates that want to kind of jack him up, you may see that. I don't think they can do it with McCarthy because they've all wedded themselves so closely to him.
Well, what about, one of their demands is that McCarthy's Super PAC not get involved in the primary. So clearly they're afraid of retaliation.
Yeah, well, and that's smart, because he's done this before. You've got a few people in that House who have had the Congressional Leadership Fund spinned against them in primaries. Mostly they've spent against them before they were incumbents. So I don't think that they would do that. But if I'm a member of the Freedom Caucus, I don't want other people who are potentially going to join the Freedom Caucus if they get elected to Congress in 2024, or even in a special election between now and then. I'm going to spend money or donate money, or we're going to spend PAC money or whatever if I'm the Freedom Caucus. I don't want that money to be wasted because CLF comes in and drops $1 million in a Republican primary against them, because I'd like to grow the Freedom Caucus. So that's a very reasonable demand. It's something that you shouldn't even have to make that demand, but this is one of the sins that Kevin McCarthy has committed against these guys that they're holding a grudge as a result of. So. And apparently I saw a thing this morning, the Club for Growth came out and said, we cut this deal and now we're not opposed to McCarthy if he sticks with it. So, that's something that should have been taken care of 6 weeks ago. Okay, because they've been demanding this for a long time. And why are we just seeing a deal cut on this now? This should have been done in early December or before. And he held out on something that, frankly, he had no leg to stand on. You do not. This is what Mitch McConnell has done with the Senate for years and years, is to sandbag and sabotage conservatives who are running in Republican primaries for the Senate. You just saw a perfect example in Alaska this past year with Kelly Tshibaka getting $6 million. You know what an impact $6 million spent in a race in Alaska would have, and that's what Mitch McConnell spent on Lisa Murkowski, who the state party and the state party's voters weren't interested in.
Right, and then he hides behind, we protect incumbents just as a matter of rule, right? No, I get it. And I get why the Freedom Caucus is taking this position with respect to that specifically, and the lack of trust, as many have said, by watching Kevin McCarthy over an extended period of time. It's not just this election cycle; it's what he's done over the last decade too that has generated concerns. Scott McKay, publisher. Scott, we got to jump. Publisher of the Hayride, contributor to the American Spectator, author of the Revivalist Manifesto as well. Pick up that book. Scott McKay, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
See you, Dan. See you, Annie. Have a good one.
Thanks, you too. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line. Coming up on Chicago's Morning Answer.
Must we experience, quote unquote, everything at 7:37?
But now into the newsroom we go. Here is Mike Scott.
Snow and 32 degrees here in Chicago. 7:32. House Republicans will try again today to elect a new speaker.
On this vote, the yeas are 216, the nays are 214. Accordingly, the motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House stands